Welcome to the Kapital News. I'm your host, Alex Kreitis. Today is Wednesday, April 21st, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me. Title of today's podcast, A World in Chaos, and Ain't That the Truth? It's only Wednesday. What a crazy week it has been thus far. Likely going to get crazier as the remainder of this week and the remainder of 2021 unfolds. I told you 2020 being in the rearview mirror, it might be a good thing, but maybe not so much. Maybe 2021 is going to be just as crazy, if not crazier. It might be setting us up for something even worse. Through the remainder of this year, into next year, we are far from out of the woods on so many issues, it's hard to keep track. So I want to go through market performance. I want to talk about some other geopolitical news that we have been discussing here, because obviously here in the U.S., it's all about the race war. Of course, it's not yet a race war, but that's what the powers that be are trying to create. I mean, all you need is two brain cells that are still functioning to put this together. Now, I hope the people don't fall for it. I really don't, because that's what they want to see happen. They want it. They want a civil war in this country. They want a race war in this country. They want people making judgments based off of people's skin color. It's ridiculous. This is not what we stand for, but this is what these people are doing. And I'm talking politicians. I am talking some of the most powerful people in this country. I'm talking about crazy Nancy Pelosi, who is third in line. You got Demented Joe, you got the hyena Kamala, and you got crazy Nancy. He's the highest level of our government, trying to incite a race war. That's what this is. And this woman is, well, there's so many of them, but Nancy is just beyond ridiculous. She's beyond stupid. Thanking George Floyd for dying. As if George Floyd was a firefighter who ran into a burning home, saved a family, but was unable to save himself. She thanked him for dying. A man on fentanyl, a repeat criminal on meth. This is supposed to be a hero? What country are we living in? This is ridiculous. It's beyond ridiculous. You have a quote-unquote leading member of Black Lives Matter, I believe out of a New York division, on record talking to a journalist, saying that they will continue to use violence as a means to get quote-unquote justice. They will use violence. They will use the riots, the looting, the vandalism, harm to people, because who knows what's going to happen when you have all of this tension running wild on the streets. People are bound to get hurt. But that's perfectly okay, because we got the decision that we wanted from this jury, and we'll continue to do it to get the same decision from other jurors in other cases, if and when they occur. Now, it was complete insanity for President Trump to make the comments that he made in the lead up to January 6th, which, of course, I was a harsh critic of the president for those statements, which were highly suggestive. And somebody, as the president, has to be aware of his words, aware of his power, and what can come of it. But he did not directly call for violence like these people are, like Maxine Waters did. Like this, quote, and I don't like using this word, but leading member of Black Lives Matter saying we'll continue to riot, we'll continue to use violence as a means to get the outcome that we want in various cases. They can say it, perfectly fine. Nothing's done about it. Again, it's all divide and conquer. It's to get people upset, and people are rightly upset. People are rightly frustrated. But what's being done about it? Absolutely nothing. We have the President of the United States making comments about this case. We have Vice President Kamala Harris making comments about this case. We still have the other officers who are going to be on trial later this year. Is this going to taint the jury pool? Like so many other instances within the Chauvin case? I mean, that gives him grounds for appeal. I think they're legitimate, but who knows what's going to happen? Maybe the appeals court is going to be intimidated. Maybe they're going to be concerned with being targeted by BLM, Antifa, or God knows who else. So maybe they'll just say, no, the judge in this case, the first time was perfectly fine. The jurors were completely within their rights to do what they did. There's nothing to see here. Doesn't matter that the Floyd family received $27 million in a civil case before the criminal case. I think the timing of it was actually when the lawyers were picking the jurors. This was during the jury selection. So these jurors were they understood what took place with the civil case where the Floyd family, George Floyd estate, was awarded $20-some million. But no, there's nothing to see here. This jury is completely impartial. This jury was not sequestered. So every day they're going into court, especially in the last few days, and they're driving through a town, their city, their home, their businesses, and they're seeing it boarded up like it's some sort of apocalyptic movie. Oh, but that's not going to, sway their decision in any manner. Listening to one idiot after the next, whether it's a local politician, a state politician, or a national, at the federal level, politician making comments. These jurors understood what happened last summer with the riots and the looting and the vandalism and the injury to persons. I mean, these jurors very well could have based their decision out of self-interest. They didn't want hell raining down on them because their identities would have been leaked sooner or later if that was the case. And depending who you listen to, some are very happy with this decision, guilty on all three counts, and you have some nut jobs like on MSNBC who are saying that they were actually hoping that it was an acquittal across the board because that's their narrative. This system is supposedly completely racist from top to bottom. So if there was an acquittal, they could have continued to make that case. They could have continued to make that argument because it would have fit their narrative. But it didn't. It came back. The system that's so corrupt gave a decision that locked the guy up. That's not supposed to happen. These are the arguments that we're getting here because it's never enough. And that is the point. That was the point, the bulk of the point of yesterday's podcast, Trial by Jury or Mob Rule. It wasn't necessarily about Derek Chauvin per se. It was about it's the bigger picture and what is coming next. It's always about what is coming next. How can the government use a crisis, turn it into an opportunity? What can they do? What type of legislation has been in the works for months or years, gathering dust somewhere in somebody's drawer, just waiting for an event like this so they can pull it out and say, here, let's push this through. And this goes to mob rule. Yeah, we have a Congress that has to have majority rule, this, that, or the other, but guess what? We don't have any representation now, do we? So it's the same thing I was discussing yesterday. Doesn't matter if it's through your representatives or through a direct democracy with the people. It's just a matter of time before 51% of the population or your representatives tell the other 49% what to do. That's where we are. We are sliding out of control. And as the world turns, we still have all of these issues with Israel, Syria, Iran, Moscow, or Russia, in Ukraine, Turkey. And the hits just keep on coming, and nobody wants to focus on these stories. The markets, I don't think, have any of this priced in whatsoever. They think everything's going to be great. I hope everything turns out great, too. But that doesn't look like it. You continue to have the chaos ensuing in Myanmar. You continue to have strife in several African nations. It gets very little media coverage whatsoever because we have to be focused 24/7 here in the States about the race war, about the war on women, about Dr. Seuss being a racist, about Mr. Potato Head being a sexist or whatever the hell they're calling him. That's the important news, not this stuff, not the facts of the case, not in totality. And again, this is not my wheelhouse. I was not following this case 24/7. gavel to gavel, if you will. But I was looking on some other podcasts or other YouTube channels, and just to see what people who did pay closer attention to this and are lawyers and were discussing these things. And I wanted to read, obviously, hear their analysis and opinion of what took place, and to read the comments. I always like reading the comments. It doesn't matter if it's of an opinion of a show that I like listening to and agree with, or it's somebody that I disagree with. I like reading the comments. I like to get a sense as to what people are thinking and saying. And I can say unequivocally that the vast majority of people and comments that I have come across are, I think, in agreement with me and many members of this audience as well, where I think we could have seen Chauvin being convicted of manslaughter, but third degree and most definitely second degree unintentional murder was overkill, that should not have happened, given the evidence that was presented, given the case that was made by the defense to raise reasonable doubt. But this is mob rule. This is mob rule, and I don't want to take away from the jury doing what they did either. I want to be respectful of that. I really do. I still want to have some respect for our institutions and some of these processes, because these are still, as I stated yesterday, a lot of what we were witnessing and trying to have a fair trial is still the basis of our justice system, and rightly so. But I don't know what the powers that be want to do. I don't know if they want to completely tear this down. Everything's about the court of public opinion, allowing the media to pick and choose what stories they want to do to manipulate and brainwash people, to taint the jury pool before these cases are heard, and basically say, yeah, you are guilty until proven innocent. And if you don't convict this guy or this woman, all hell's going to break loose on you. You know, it's almost the case where the jury should have acquitted him on all counts to send a message that we are not going to be intimidated by mob rule and by the media picking these stories and picking and choosing what evidence they want to use and broadcast into the minds and ears of people across this country. This is how crazy it's getting, and it's only going to get worse. And I, of course, am very concerned about the legislation that is likely going to come in the name of George Floyd. Okay? And that's what's likely coming. Something is going to come, and it ain't going to be pretty, because it never is. And as we discussed yesterday, you had that shooting out of Columbus, Ohio, where the young teenage girl was killed. Oh, she was about to stab somebody. The police were called. They show up. There's chaos on the scene. This young teenager has a knife. She's about to stab somebody with it, very likely going to kill this person. The police officer acts in the moment to serve and protect, right? Isn't that what the police force is supposed to be all about? Protect and serve. Pulls out his firearm, shoots the girl with the knife, and she later dies. Now, what do you think would have happened if this young girl actually stabbed the other young girl, who was black as well, and then you get this body cam footage? Everybody would have been screaming at the police officer, why didn't you shoot her? Why didn't you take her down? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. And this is going to lead to police officers resigning, retiring early, not treating certain calls with a lot of urgency that is needed and would be required. And this, we're already seeing this. This is already taking place. This was taking place last year. The whole defund the police movement, which was completely ridiculous, and proved so with the data. But the data, the facts, the totality of evidence does not matter. What do you think? How do you feel? What's your quote-unquote truth? And that's it. Plain as day to see what is going on here. And yet people are going to continue to be brainwashed. They're going to continue to be guilted in to being a racist just because you're white. You're white. MSNBC and CNN said, you got a problem because you're white. You've never said anything racist in your life. You judge people based off of the content of their character, off of their actions, off of their words. You've never done anything like this, but you're bad. You're bad. Because MSNBC, CNN, Crazy Nancy, that idiot Maxine Waters, AOC, they tell you so. They tell you so. This is a racist country to its core. That's what you are supposed to believe. That's what you're supposed to believe. If it's so bad, I don't know why people stay here. If it's so bad, you can leave. You can renounce your citizenship. You can cut up your passport. You can leave. You can go away. If it's so much better somewhere else, why do you want to be here? I just don't get it. People don't understand how good they have it in this country with respect to diversity. You think this type of diversity exists in any other country on this planet to the degree that it does here? You think the Chinese want a whole bunch of other people there? You think the Germans want a whole bunch of other people there? The Japanese, etc., etc.? No, they don't. They don't. We have everybody. We take everybody. We're the melting pot. That's something to be celebrated. But of course, it's never enough. And this is just one small step in this movement that is going to continue to push ahead at breakneck speed. Because they got what they wanted, and they're going to continue to grind it. They are not going to stop with this. They'll come after the guns. They're going to come after the police forces. And who knows how the police are going to respond to this. So there's a lot going on in this country with this type of stuff, but people are waking up. I mean, you cannot not wake up with what's going on. The question is what is done about it. And that's what gives me probably the greatest amount of concern, because most people don't know what the hell's going on at the end of the day. Canadian inflation rate is at over a one-year high. The annual inflation rate in Canada rose to 2.2% in the month of March, up from 1.1% in February, but still slightly below expectations of 2.3%. But there's no inflation. Speaking of no inflation, Lebanon inflation rate hits a fresh record high. The Lebanese consumer price inflation rate rose to an all-time high of 157.9% year-on-year in March, from 155.4% in the previous month. You heard me correctly, 157.9%. But there's no inflation. There's nothing to see here. These people are getting along just fine. Don't worry about it. The dollar index is at 91.103, 91.103. Not too much volatility in the overnight session here with the Forex market. Overnight futures trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is down about 0.1%. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 are both in the red as well, down about 0.2%. Big rally cash trade in Japan, putting on a gain of about 2 percentage points. A sea of green across the pond in Europe today. It was a sea of green here in the U.S. as well during the day session. Just getting back some of those recent losses, just a little bit of a retracement. The question is, will we continue downward or will we bounce back? Cash trade in Australia up 0.3%. Chinese stocks are flat. On the commodity front, energy prices pulling back today. WTI $61.07 a barrel. Brent $65.06 a barrel. Natural gas $2.70. Gold and silver both had a nice day, which is something I like to see. Gold $1,793 an ounce. Silver $26.49 an ounce. Strong performance with silver today. Copper $4.27 a pound. And lastly, Uncle Sam's 10-year junk note is yielding 1.54%. So I will continue to ask the question, if yields are going down, does that mean that the economy is weakening? Because when they were going up, the Fed says that is indicative of a strengthening economy. Then wouldn't the opposite be true? Basic question. I would like an answer. I'm not going to get it. So, on to some of this geopolitical news. I will start with Demented Joe. So we have, this is out of CNN, Biden preparing to declare massacre of Armenians, a genocide, risking break with Turkey. And we have talked about the importance of Turkey over the past few weeks and how they might be playing a few sides against each other. And this is just a very fluid environment. So President Joe Biden is preparing to declare the massacre of an estimated 1 million or more Armenians under the Ottoman Empire a genocide this week, risking a potential fracture with Turkey, but fulfilling a campaign pledge to finally use the word as president to describe the mass killings after a series of his predecessors stopped short. Two people familiar with the decision said the president was expected to make the declaration as a part of an official statement on Remembrance Day, which falls on Saturday. Both said it was possible he would change his mind before then and issue a statement merely recognizing the event without describing it as a genocide. Oh, Demented Joe might change his mind again. How many times has he done this so far? U.S. officials have also sent signals to allies outside the administration who have been pushing for an official declaration that the president will recognize the genocide, a third person familiar with the matter said. The government of Turkey often registers complaints when foreign governments describe the event, which began in 1915, using the word genocide. They maintain that it was wartime and there were losses on both sides, and put the number of dead Armenians at 300,000. Presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump both avoided using the word genocide to avoid angering Ankara, Ankara being the capital of Turkey, because they understand the geopolitical importance of Turkey. But Biden has determined that relations with Turkey and its president, which have deteriorated over the past several years anyway, should not prevent the use of a term that would validate the plight of Armenians more than a century ago and signal a commitment to human rights today. So Demented Joe has no problem, perhaps, we'll find out, calling this a genocide, something that happened over 100 years ago. Yet how tough a stance is he taking on China and their human rights violations with the Uyghurs and so many others within their country? Is he calling on major corporations in the United States to stop doing business in China with the Chinese based off of their human rights violations? No. And he's not going to. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. Also, we're supposed to be so concerned about the climate. Yet, the Japanese, I'm sure many of you are aware of this as well, the Japanese are going to be releasing nuclear wastewater into the Pacific Ocean within a couple of years after it's treated. Biden has no problem with this whatsoever. But I thought the environment was very important. You know, the Chinese don't like this action by the Japanese. The South Koreans don't like it, and I'm sure many other neighbors in that region don't like it. If the water is going to be so safe, and of course this is from the Fukushima event, the nuclear reactor that broke down from the tsunami, I think back in, 2011, so 10 years already. So they're claiming that this nuclear wastewater is going to be treated. It's going to be perfectly safe to do this. If that's the case, then why do you got to throw it back into the ocean? Why don't you use it to water and irrigate your crops if it's so safe, or use it to wash and clean your streets if it's so safe? Why do you got to throw it into the ocean? But, you know, that's the important stuff. Human rights from something that happened over 100 years ago, and the environment. We're in a climate crisis. Don't worry about it. Throw nuclear wastewater into the ocean. Perfectly okay. So that's it with Turkey. And again, Turkey is important geopolitically speaking because they might, form an alliance with, it could be the United States, it could be the European Union, it could be China, it could be Russia. So this is something to pay close attention to, which takes us to an article out of Al Jazeera. Russia says Ukraine, NATO, continuing military preparations. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine simmered on Wednesday as Moscow accused Kiev and NATO of continuing military preparations amid heightened concern over possible hostilities in the conflict-stricken Donbas region. Russia's foreign ministry called on Ukraine and the Transatlantic Security Alliance, which counts Kiev as an ally, to refrain from actions that could lead to escalation. Kiev and Moscow have traded blame over increasing clashes in the Donbas, where Ukrainian troops have battled Russian-backed separatist forces since the rebels seized a swath of territory there in April of 2014. Ukraine says the conflict has killed more than 14,000 people. The latest clashes come as Ukraine, its Western allies, and NATO accuse Russia of engineering a provocative buildup of tens of thousands of troops on Ukraine's eastern border and in Crimea, which Russia annexed from Ukraine in March of 2014. In turn, Russia has accused NATO and leading alliance member, the United States, of provocative activity in the Black Sea region. The U.S. and its NATO allies have regularly sent Navy ships to the Black Sea, vexing Moscow. However, Washington reversed a planned deployment of 2 destroyers in the region earlier this month as the rift between Kiev and the Kremlin widen. So already Demented Joe changing his mind there. Kiev calls for talks with the Kremlin. In a separate development, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky signed a law on Wednesday allowing reservists to be called up for military service without announcing mobilization. Approved by Parliament late in March, the measure makes it possible to significantly boost the country's armed forces. Kiev has also called for talks with Moscow in an apparent bid to calm the continuing tensions. In an address to the nation delivered on Tuesday, Zelensky challenged his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin, to meet him in the Donbas region for talks to end the conflict there. The Ukrainian president, who was elected in 2019 on promises to bring an end to the fighting, also accused Russia of playing a double game by participating in peace negotiations while massing troops on Ukraine's border. Recent satellite images showed hundreds of Russian military vehicles stationed at multiple bases, firing ranges, and field camps along the border with Ukraine. Dozens of warplanes parked at air bases in southwestern Russia and Crimea have also been seen. Quote, a considerable number of Russian troops are concentrated near our border, according to Zelensky. Officially, Russia calls this military exercises. Unofficially, the whole world calls this blackmail, according to Zelensky. Ready for war. The Kremlin has repeatedly denied playing any role in the conflict of Donbas and has described its troop movements along its western border with Ukraine and in the Crimea as defensive. It has also stated the military units moved to border positions would remain in position as long as Moscow saw fit. The continuing standoff has prompted Ukraine to call on NATO for full membership. Ukraine is currently an ally of NATO, but not a member. Quote, our citizens need clear signals that in the 8th year of the war, a country that is a shield for Europe, at the cost of its lives, will receive support not just as partners from the stands, but as players on the same team directly on the field, shoulder to shoulder, President Zelensky said. Ukraine wants to end the conflict through diplomacy, but is ready to defend itself if attacked, he concluded. Does Ukraine want the war? No. But is Ukraine ready for the war? Yes. Hopefully war does not break out. Obviously, there's already the conflict, but if there is a war in this region, it is likely to trickle over into something much, much bigger, quite possibly World War III. I hate saying that, but that is the possibility because you are bringing so many different superpowers to the field. That's exactly what you're doing. So another story here is Israel strikes targets in Syria after a missile attack. This is out of the Associated Press. A missile launched from Syria was fired into southern Israel early Thursday, their time setting off air raid sirens near the country's top-secret nuclear reactor, the Israeli military said. In response, it said it attacked the missile launcher and air defense system in neighboring Syria. The incident, marking the most serious violence between Israel and Syria in years, pointed to likely Iranian involvement. Iran, which maintains troops and proxies in Syria, has accused Israel of a series of attacks on its nuclear facilities, including sabotage at its Natanz nuclear facility on April 11th, and vowed revenge. It also threatened to complicate U.S.-led attempts to revive the international nuclear deal with Iran. The Israeli army said it had deployed a missile defense system but could not confirm if the incoming missile was intercepted, though it said there had been no damage. The air raid sirens were sounded in Abu Qurnat, a village just a few miles from Dimona, the Negev desert town where Israel's nuclear reactor is located. Explosions heard across Israel might have been the air defense systems. The Israeli military initially described the weapon fired as a surface-to-air missile, which is usually used for air defense against warplanes or other missiles. That could suggest the Syrian missile had targeted Israeli warplanes, but missed and flown off errantly. However, Dimona is some 185 miles south of Damascus, a long range for an errantly fired surface-to-air missile. So there's obviously back and forth between what Syria is doing, what involvement Iran has, if any, and what the Israeli military is willing to confirm. So it is a world in chaos. And this doesn't talk about, again, the issues in Myanmar, the issues in Africa. This does not take into consideration the issues with China and Hong Kong, and China and Taiwan, in China and the Philippines, and so many other issues. So you get why I say 2021 is crazy. Don't be so thankful that 2020 is in the rearview mirror. You understand why I say all the time that there is a lot of dry tinder and kindling all over the place, and all it's going to take is a very small spark to ignite all of this stuff? Now, is all of this just grandstanding? Is it people bluffing? Or is this something much more serious? And when you have all of these forces in position, the chances of a mistake occurring just increase, and I think they increase exponentially. And we have been taken to war off of false flag attacks many times throughout the history of the world. And to think that that could not happen again, I think would be foolish thinking. So it could be something real. A mistake could happen. It could be intentional, or it could be a false flag. Those are a lot of risks. I don't think markets fully have this priced in. I think they're thinking that everything's going to turn out fine. I hope everything turns out fine. I hope we can work these things out through diplomacy. But I don't know what the end game is here with all of these folks. It's the geopolitical game. I'm not in their minds. I don't have their intelligence briefings. I don't know what their goals are. That's all speculation from our perspective. And it's really a guessing game from the perspective of a lot of these other world leaders, too, as to what the others are going to do or want to do. Causes a lot of chaos. Causes a lot of concern. And you still have all of the economic fallout from COVID-19 and just the massive global debt bubble that continues to get blown bigger and bigger by the day. And nobody says a damn thing, because as long as your portfolio goes up as a result of it, you don't care. And when you will care is when that air is let out of the bubble and you lose most of what you just made. Then you'll care. By that time, it'll be too late. Again, the time for proactive measures is pretty much gone. That horse is out of the barn. That ship has sailed. The question is, what do we do once all of this dust settles? That's the ultimate question. So there you have it, a world in chaos. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Kapital News. I am Alex Karitis. Godspeed.